will face a vote of confidence on Friday, which he could lose. And then we have that unrest in Spanish politics. So bottom line is, Neil, there's a lot of noise. We've seen it before. The question is, will it result in any real substance? Certainly enough to spook the markets today. But you know what? The U.S. economy is doing just fine, and hopefully calmer heads will prevail.
We shall see, my friend. Ashley Webster, thank you very, very much. The read now from Fox Business Network's Charles Payne, Deidre Bolton. Deidre, a lot of this was built on this fear that Europe's falling apart, or at least its single currency is, and that could boomerang on U.S. banks and the like. Is that a justifiable concern?
So I think it is certainly worth following, and we've seen the reaction in our own markets today. I mean, if you look at the group that really weighted our stocks down, it is the financials. And if you look at the S&P 500, something like 69 financials, insurance companies, these were the ones that got hit. So we have to pay attention because we are feeling the effects here. Now, whether or not Italy pulls out of the euro or some kind of drastic measure like that, that still seems to be honestly low probability. But it does just remind us, listen, Italy has a lot of debt. Guess who's on the hook? Mostly French banks, mostly German banks. And listen, U.S. banks do plenty of trading with them. So there is a potentiality, a possibility of contagion. We're just not at step 10 out of 10 yet. This is maybe a 3.5 out of 10, Neil.
You know, Charles, today, of course, all investments were soured, although not as soured as earlier on, well off our lows. But what happens tomorrow, you think?
You know, there were some pockets of strength and resolve. Some of these big tech names, semiconductor stocks, in fact, were higher. I think cooler heads will prevail, but, you know, this goes beyond the economics we're talking about, Neil. This is part of a global pushback against the global elites. This is not about the party that won in March not getting their act together. This is about the will of the Italian people being snatched from them, just as the will of the British people, as there's still issues of trying to derail Brexit. There's a major pushback against the establishment on both sides of the Atlantic. It has massive ramifications. We won't see them all play out immediately, but I think to ignore them, the market certainly couldn't today, and I think it would behoove all of us to pay attention.
You know, Deidre, another thing that was noticeable today was this idea that maybe the flight to quality wouldn't be in stocks, but in our own bond market or dollar. And a lot of people, if in doubt, seem to park their money there. That is a consistent theme. What do you make of that?
It is certainly a consistent theme. And Ashley ran through the numbers, and they're up on the screen right now. So the 10-year Treasury yield, you know, basically, to your point, people were buying what they perceive as safer haven assets. So that is government debt. We did see more people buying bonds, so therefore the yields went down with that inverse relationship. I think the ramifications are also what all this instability means for our Fed. So I've seen a lot of reaction pieces today saying the real takeaway, and one of the reasons why the banking group did trade down, is because people feel like, okay, if there's more global instability, then there is going to be a sustained flight to quality. Therefore, our bonds are going to be a little bit more purchased up. The Fed may stay on hold. And, you know, that's not exactly great for the lending part of banks' businesses, Neil.
No, not at all. You know, Charles, you always remind me volatile markets are a good rule of thumb. That's certainly been the case this year. Lesson learned today?
You know what? That we are still trapped in a very tight trading range at this market. I think ultimately we'll love to be able to trade on fundamentals, but it seems like every week there's a non-fundamental reason for investors to be worried. And again, today, it was something that happened on the continent of Europe. Some days it's what's happening, it happens in geopolitics. Sometimes it's what happens in Washington, D.C. But over and over again, and I say this specifically to investors who are getting frustrated, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, because fundamentals aren't playing a role. Ultimately, they will.
All right, guys, I want to thank you both very, very much. Well, you know, if the Canadian Roseanne were a stock, she'd be a buy on almost everyone's list a little more than 24 hours ago. She could do no wrong. Her show could do no wrong. It was an unqualified hit, and everyone wanted to be on her dream team. That was until she made her own tweet nightmare. Julie Banderas on the undoing of a Hollywood star who went to stop very quickly. What happened?
Yeah, Neil, you know this isn't the first time Roseanne Barr has gone on a racist rant on Twitter, but for ABC Today was the final straw. The star posted the tweet this morning and later deleted it, saying Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby equals VJ. Barr was referring to former Obama aide Valerie Jarrett, who is black but not Muslim. The tweet, nonetheless, was in response to another user tweeting an article from a conspiratorial right-wing outlet claiming Obama's CIA spied on French presidential candidates. After likely getting tons of backlash from network executives, Roseanne later apologized, tweeting, "I apologize to Valerie Jarrett and to all Americans. I am truly sorry for making a bad joke about her politics and her looks. I should have known better. Forgive me. My joke was in bad taste," adding, "I apologize. I am now leaving Twitter." Well, apology or no apology, that's when the chips began to fall. Stand-up comedian Wanda Sykes, who was also a consulting producer on the show, first tweeted, "I will not be returning to Roseanne on ABC." Then came ABC's statement from ABC Entertainment president Channing Dungey, who wrote, "Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values, and we have decided to cancel her show." Robert Iger, the chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company, retweeted that statement and added this: "There was only one thing to do here, and that was the right thing." Her fellow cast member Sarah Gilbert also tweeting the following: "Roseanne's recent comments about Valerie Jarrett and so much more are abhorrent and do not reflect the beliefs of our cast and crew or anyone associated with our show. I am disappointed in her actions, to say the least." This hugely successful 90s series reboot was in fact renewed for a second season just one episode after it delivered over 18 million viewers. So clearly a huge loss for ABC, but proof that racism and ratings do not mix. Neil.
No, they do not. Thank you very, very much. Also, we should let you know here that Disney CEO Bob Iger agreeing with the decision his company made, saying on Twitter that was only one thing to do here, and that was the right thing. That is firing Roseanne. Charlie Gasparino from Fox Business Network. It's all about the business in the end, right?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't even a close call, Neil. Using, that type of language, it's been an old, racist meme for many years, comparing black people to animals, and that's what she did. And I don't know how you can have somebody on your network who's kind of a spokesman. I mean, let's be real clear. Roseanne Barr is no intellectual. No one's saying that she's some brilliant orator or she's got some brilliant mind. But, she's a star of a hit program. She's in many ways a representative of their business. And she went out and just said something that's so repugnant and disgusting, and something that for centuries was used against black people. There is no business recourse other than to fire her. And I'm sure there's people that are going to come on your show and say, well, how about the First Amendment? And, she's not so bad over here. And by the way, she said a bunch of other stupid stuff in this whole thing with Soros and going after Chelsea Clinton. And, we all have our moments. But this wasn't even at the line. This was not a politically incorrect joke about eyeliner that the conservatives went nuts over during the White House Correspondents' Dinner. This is so far over the line, bringing up such racist imagery from what society used to use to hold down black people, who, by the way, are an audience that ABC wants to reach, okay? And maybe not in this program, but in a lot of others, that she had to go. I mean, it's just, and I just can't.
And there was a history of these type of musings on Twitter and elsewhere, so they knew what they were getting. This brought it a little bit further along here. But I wonder what a lot of people are going to say, well, maybe we got to be very cautious then going forward with whoever we hire for whatever might be deemed ahead.
Yeah, listen, listen, conservatives, there's often a double standard with conservatives and liberals can get away with calling President Trump all sorts of names, and if you dare to say something about President Obama, sometimes you were ostracized and attacked.
Yeah, but even a liberal couldn't get away with language like this.
This is so far over the top, so insane, so racist, bringing up such imagery that was used in the past to hold black people down. That like I said, Roseanne Barr is far from an intellectual, but even she should know better. And I don't know how. I mean, the best thing you could say about this, and I can't wait to hear some of my conservative friends try to rationalize it, because they will. is that, maybe she was not of right mind. Maybe she drank before she tweeted this out, because it makes no sense. This is abhorrent behavior. And let's be real clear here, Neil. There's no First Amendment right to a job. You can listen, if she wants to tweet on Twitter all day racist stuff, okay, well, maybe Twitter will say it violates their terms of service and take it down, but she can do it theoretically. You don't have a major company doesn't have to be associated with that type of thinking.
Particularly a parent company like Disney that tries to avoid that very sort of thing.
And here's the thing: conservatives went nuts on that White House Correspondents' Dinner speech, which some of it, with Michelle Wolf, some of it was funny, and some of it obviously wasn't. That wasn't even near this. This is
and it was tweeted out. It was well thought out, but it was not well thought out. All right, thank you, buddy. Thank you very, very much. You heard what Charlie thought about that. That does represent sort of the industry, the collective view of a lot of people saying that she just overstepped herself. She went one step too far. Herman Cain has a different take on this. That you want to hear, because he's next. All right, her company dumped her, her talent agency dumped her, even her colleagues on her show are trying to forget all about her. What happened to Roseanne Barr to fall from grace so quickly? Rarely do we see it in Hollywood, even these days. Former Godfather's Pizza CEO, former GOP presidential candidate Herman Cain, on what he makes of it all. Herman, what do you think?
Well, first of all, it was despicable, and it did have a racist implication. I agree with Charlie and everybody else and the reaction based upon what she said. She overstepped her bounds, and she didn't think about what the backlash would be. However, I don't disagree with all of the criticism that she has gotten. I question whether or not that was the only motivation for canceling the show, and here's why. Remember, ABC is one of the networks of the three major networks that has provided 91% negative coverage of this president, and because her show defended some of the conservative principles and conservative results, maybe, I don't know the answer to this, and we will never know. I just suspect personally that this gave them a very visible excuse to cancel the show. It was despicable and, yes, racist.
But she gave them that ammunition. She gave them that sword,
yes,
right?
She did. She gave them that ammunition, and that's too bad for her, as well as all of the people that had jobs that were associated with that show.
Do you think that the same thing would have happened, or at least happened as quickly, for, let's say, a liberal actor, actress, comedian from a largely deemed liberal show?
Probably not as fast.
But it still would have happened, right?
It probably still would have happened, especially if it was so overwhelming, it would have happened. And so, you can only speculate at this point. What we do know is what she said crossed the line. That's what we know. And ABC took the actions that it thought were necessary in order to say we do not condone this sort of language, even if you thought you were trying to be funny.
But what if you're a company like Disney, also like making money, and you're making money hand over fist with Roseanne and committed to an additional season of it? So whatever your politics, whether you're red or blue, you certainly like the green rolling in.
Right. See, here's where that raises my other suspicion that we will never know. I believe that some companies are so obsessed with what I call TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, conservative principles, that even if it sacrifices making money, they would not like to have that kind of defense of conservatism and Donald Trump in a popular show. We don't know that. But I'm saying sometimes some of these organizations will forego making more money with successful ratings just to basically try to stand by their political point of view.
Do you think Roseanne's a racist?
I don't think so, no. I've seen her show many times when she was in her previous show. I don't think she's a racist. I think she made some comments that she didn't think about that would come across as sounding racist, and indeed they were comments, racist comments.
Herman Cain, thank you very much. Good seeing you again.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, in the meantime, North Korea's top spy, the head of their equivalent of the CIA, is coming to pay us a visit. Now, this is a guy who's been a lot of violence involving South Koreans and killing scores of them over the years. And he's coming representing the guy who runs the country who's killed millions. How does that go? How will it go? After this. All right, you probably know Kim Jong-un, but you know Kim Jong-chol. He's the power behind the throne, and he can be a ruthless power at that. A lot assigned to him as the head of the country's, sort of like their CIA, and worse. He's coming to town to pay a visit to the State Department and elsewhere to set up things for that powwow that they hope to see still happen in June. Rich Edson at the State Department with the latest on all that. Hey, Rich.
Hey, Neil. He is on his way. The vice chairman of the Central Committee, Kim Jong-chol, is traveling to New York. This will be the highest official visit from a North Korean in 18 years. He will meet with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, this week. The secretary travels to New York tomorrow. The two met previously when Secretary Pompeo traveled to North Korea. Kim Jong-chol is deeply involved in North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un's international outreach and attending the Olympics, in discussions with China, South Korea, and the United States. He's also under U.S. sanctions for his suspected involvement in North Korea's nuclear program, the deadly attack on a South Korean ship in 2010, and the Sony hack. The State Department says U.S. and North Korean negotiators are also in the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. They're planning that summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, targeting that date of June 12th in Singapore. The White House also says there is a pre-advance team in Singapore trying to do the setup for this. There's logistics of this summit, but there are also the discussions and negotiations surrounding how exactly North Korea would surrender its nuclear program and what the United States is willing to give in return. Neil?
Thank you, my friend. In the meantime, then, how do you negotiate when your partner is, well, someone like this, negotiating on behalf of someone who's, well, like Kim Jong-un? Well, let's get the read from former CIA analyst Buck Sexton. These are both guys who have a curious, violent past. I'm talking about both this vice chair and, of course, now the leader of the country. But these are the only guys with whom we can negotiate. We can't pick and choose our leaders, so I understand that. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, you have to go slowly, carefully, and not have particularly high expectations, Neil. If you're going to work with the North Korean regime, you obviously have to get a few power brokers on board beyond just Kim Jong-un. No matter how totalitarian a country may be, there is an inner circle around the supreme ruler, in this case, the chairman of the Workers' Party, which is a Kim Jong-un is. And once you get to Kim Jong-chol, then what I think you see is somebody who has spanned multiple dynasties, or rather multiple iterations of the Kim dynasty. So if you're looking for massive change, if you're looking for someone to come along who is able to bridge North Korea's past to some kind of future, and again, Neil, less than 50-50 shot that this is going to go, I think, where anyone hopes that it goes, but you need somebody with this kind of gravitas and background. Now, that also means that somebody, as you pointed out, who's been involved in shelling, sinking, doing very aggressive things against South Korea, and who knows what on the intelligence side. So this is where we start to see that it's going to be a piece-by-piece process that'll stretch well beyond just the June summit.
You know, I just see one case of lie after lie, though. Kim Jong-chol, a question on this is that they had nothing to do with black ops when he did, that he had nothing to do with U.S. cyber attacks when he did, that he had nothing to do with an attack on a South Korean warship that left 46 dead in 2010, when later on we found out he was behind it. So I understand the limitations we have with this is the bunch with whom we have to negotiate, but this is the same bunch whose word we have to take and then later on verify. How can we do that?
It's very difficult, and I'm not sure that it's even possible under the best of circumstances. We're trying to continue with the pressure, and you're seeing now some indications that North Korea is having to get even more creative with its efforts to get around the sanctions, UN-imposed sanctions, U.S.-backed sanctions, and Chinese ships keep coming up on the radar, literally and figuratively here, as those that are trying to help the North Koreans get around those sanctions, which also brings me, Neil, to this is a three-way conversation, really, in terms of three primary players. I think we saw the Trump administration with its recent overture to China over ZTE, showing, okay, China, if you want to be helpful in our talks with North Korea, we also can be more helpful towards you. But now with the possibility of the reimposition of large tariffs coming up here, 50 billion in tariffs to start off with, we're showing the Chinese that, you know, this summit is off, and if this thing crashes and burns, guess what? We have levers of power that we can use as well to make things more difficult for China. On the North Korean side of it specifically, though, Neil, this is a slow and plodding process that will involve a lot of back and forth. I don't think anyone believes, even if the summit happens, which we don't know if it will or not, that this is something that will solve it or even have a specific roadmap for what solving it would be. And in the meantime, we're hoping for a seismic change in North Korea's attitude towards the United States and the rest of the world. So this is revolutionary. This is dramatic stuff the Trump administration is trying here. This is not something that anybody would assume could be easily pulled off or, as I said, even has particularly good odds of being pulled off, but they're trying.
Indeed. All right, Buck, good seeing you again, my friend. Thank you very, very much.
Good to see you.
Well, you know, before there was Bob Mueller and concerns about an investigation that was running wildly out of control, there was Ken Starr and concerns about a prosecutor whose investigation was going wildly out of control, specifically chasing down real estate deals and transactions involving one Bill and Hillary Clinton, later on an intern in a blue dress. I caught up with Ken Starr, and he had the darndest things to say about history repeating itself after this. All right, they've been busy today playing a lot of bites from President Trump, extolling the rating success of Roseanne Barr and all of this, as if to imply here that the guy's a racist because she, of course, had that racist tweet today. Of course, that racist tweet came out today. There have been other suggestive ones in the past, but that was the big one. But is that fair? Is that right? Not the former White House press secretary under President George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer. That is a little bit creative, but what do you make of that, Ari?
You know, frankly, Neil, I have no idea. I've never watched her show. I didn't watch it, the old one. I didn't watch the new one. The only thing I can tell you from my point of view, Neil, is as a conservative, I'm loath to tell the private sector who to hire or who to fire. You know, when that professor came out and said Barbara Bush, she was glad Barbara Bush died, I joined with other conservatives saying it's not our place to tell the private sector if they should fire her or not. And so I'm in the same spot here. ABC has made their decision. Certainly what Roseanne tweeted was reprehensible. It's not a good message, but private employee, it's between her and her business.
I think you're right on that free market perspective. Let the market decide, let the companies involved decide. But already you're going to see that a lot of people said, all right, that's interesting, a conservative icon praised by a conservative president who, you know, wrapped himself around the success of this show. Even though it was not endorsing the show itself, any of the stuff to which we would attach the racist label. But that is where I think this might go, Ari. That would be a huge mistake, would it not?
Look, Neil, I've never liked the culture wars or the ricochet shots. And if somebody tries to go after Donald Trump because of this, it's a ricochet shot. It's blaming him for something he didn't do. I don't like it when the right does it to the left. I don't like it when the left does it to the right. If this blows up into another one of those things, I think we're all going to be in the position where the American people are scratching their heads saying, what on earth are people talking about?
Yeah, I hear you. I'm wondering, too, as well, Ari, about the message it sends. Like you say, corporations, they abhor controversy. If they can get away from it, they can. Of course, I always like to think that companies like Wall Street, it's not about red or blue. I so often say it's about green. They like money. But anything that gets potentially in the way of that, like these comments would for Roseanne, they're left with no choice here. But the flip side is, and do you think it gets you know, companies, creative companies, to be super, super cautious, almost totally the other way?
Well, I don't think the entertainment industry is ever going to be super, super cautious. The entertainment industry historically makes a living figuring out where the line is and going right up to the line, and every once in a while somebody falls off of it.
Yeah, but they pull back jarringly from it. They have a history, especially in the Me Too movement, where they pull back jarringly from that. So they can't calibrate quickly.
Well, I think that's right. They can't calibrate quickly. Edgy comedians always try to calibrate, and sometimes they go too far. And what I also hope happens here is somebody should figure out, are they being consistent? Are there any liberals who said horrendous, reprehensible things about conservatives and got to keep their shows? But again, it's a private sector decision. If they want to be consistent or inconsistent, it's up to them. But I'm telling you, that'll be next. Somebody's going to figure out if there's a reverse situation here where they didn't fire somebody. And I suspect we'll be talking about this one for a while, even though it's something that, I just think there are more important things to do.
Yeah, but the head of controversy, the head of boycotts, this seems to be the easier thing to do. This was a no-brainer, but makes you wonder.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Thank you very, very much. I threw that one right at you, and you were gracious enough to at least consider the implications. Ari Fleischer. In the meantime, remember Ken Starr? Remember the famous questions about the blue dress and everything else, and getting Bill Clinton to admit in a video deposition that, yeah, I did have a relationship with that woman. It veered far afield, but that was then. Could something very, very different, but the same veering far afield be happening now? Ken Starr and his thoughts next. Well, the president has been lashing out at the Mueller probe. That is nothing new. The reports that the FBI surveilled his campaign way before that probe. Is he right to be concerned? Was there cabal against him? Was there sort of an unwritten sort of a code out there? Just spy on Team Trump. I caught up with former independent counsel Ken Starr, who told me over the weekend on Cavuto Live that the president has a point. The president calls it a spy, and this is Spygate. Democrats say nothing of the sort. What do you say?
Not much difference. People can quarrel over the difference. We tend to think of an informant as someone who's inside an organization and reporting out. A spy, we think of someone from the outside who comes in from the cold or whatever. But the point is, the person who the spy or confidential informant is dealing with really doesn't know about the relationship that individual has with the foreign government or whomever. So it's a clandestine operation.
So someone who shouldn't be there is there.
At least there's a question of whether they should be there. There's a certain false pretense, right, to the relationship. You think one thing dealing with the confidential informant or the spy, when
but
it's actually
this person has
another.
Penetrated a campaign, not hired by the campaign. So you can understand the Trump campaign's concern.
Absolutely. I think that we can play these word games. The key is what are the facts? Let's get the facts. Let's assess the facts. And then in this country, we need accountability. Why was this done? What was the basis for it, and so forth?
Now, when you finally were able to talk to President Clinton, you had originally subpoenaed him to talk to you, right?
Well, no, we originally invited him. We invited very polite letters, I believe, in the respect for the presidency, and we tried to follow that throughout the investigation to not only accommodate his schedule, but accommodate the dignity of the presidency.
So you never subpoenaed Ken? I'm sorry.
We did issue a subpoena, but we then, through negotiation, withdrew the subpoena.
Because certain allowances were made for him, right? That he could have his lawyers by his side, and the testimony would be limited, right? I think it's about 4 hours when all is said and done.
Yes, perfectly reasonable. And I think those are the kinds of accommodations that need to be made for any president.
Sure. So do you think these accommodations are being made right now in the talks between Bob Mueller and President?
I have no information, but I have little doubt. You bet. There's going to be a back and forth, especially what's the scope of the inquiry. You hear the criminal defense lawyers who say, and I understand the perspective fully, he shouldn't go to sit down with Bob Mueller. But he is the President of the United States, and so I think there's a certain, needless to say, obligation that attaches to that. But we'll see what the President ends up doing. I think Rudy being on the team is extremely helpful. I have the highest regard for Rudy Giuliani, and I realize he has more of a public role, but I think Rudy is going to be giving the president very good advice, up, down, or a negotiated settlement.
You know, many people say it's a mistake for this president to do it, and they point to the Bill Clinton example where he thought he could control the process, and some say he embarrassed himself. Do you agree? Not with the Bill Clinton thing, you were doing a lot of the questioning, but more to the point with the president subjecting himself to this, that it could veer into all sorts of directions.
That's what the defense lawyers have to prevent. Stop the veering. Our questioning was very targeted. It was sensitive, but it nonetheless was targeted. We were not asking about his personal finances and the like. So it was understood, and we abided by our agreement. We simply wanted the president to tell the truth. I know Bob Mueller. I think Mueller's view is, and I know there are criticisms about the people around him, Mueller needs the truth, wants the truth. And so if you do agree to go in, Mr. President, please tell the truth.
All right. You made history in that interview and in that chat with this line of questioning. Let's take a look.
Did Monica Lewinsky perform oral sex on you? They would like a direct answer to that, yes or no.
Well, that's not the first time that question's been asked. But since I believe, and I think any person, reasonable person would believe, that that is not covered in the definition of sexual relations I was given, I'm not going to answer except to refer to my statement. I had intimate contact with her that was inappropriate. I do not believe any of the contacts I had with her violated the definition I was given. Therefore, I believe I did not do anything but testify truthfully on these matters.
Now, that got out within minutes of that tape being. We'll look back to your investigation, Ken, and say this investigation